All right, what's up, everybody? I could hear. Let me know if you could hear me okay. Marcus is on as well. Marcus, would you mind saying hello to make sure they could hear you as well?
Uh, yeah, hello. I'm hearing you well.
Awesome. I am very, very, very excited to be testing this, the Dex board, which is essentially a way to take the DE10 Nano, the same thing that you run the Mister project off of, and turn it into basically an OSSC Pro. So while we have a bunch of people um, joining, I'm just going to do the first basic stuff, and which is a lag test, which should be pretty much near zero, uh, and kind of go from there. Marcus, is there anything you suggest people know about this before we start? Is there anything that for basic use that like what separates it from the original OSSC?
Well, it's more like OSSC Pro Lite version, so it's basically a add-on board for the DE series development boards from Intel.
Okay. And the software though is based pretty much on the OSSC Pro software, right?
Yeah, the firmware is somewhat common with so many of the features here are also available on OSSC Pro, and of course the Pro is much more powerful. So, for example, the 120 Hz at 1080p you can't really run on this board, but you will be with the Pro.
Okay.
But
So
for most
go
Yeah,
ahead.
for most things, it's pretty similar, of course. There's limited inputs with this board, but yeah, for the functionality, I think it's pretty close.
Cool. And for anybody who's unaware, I am around the New York City area, and Marcus is in Finland. So there's going to be a very long delay in this stream between us, and apologies in advance. So what I'm going to do is just start out by doing a lag test of my current capture setup. Um, if I can get it full screen here. So this is just the Time Sleuth going directly into my capture card using the Rec Central 4 app. So this is a baseline test, and obviously I wouldn't do it this way normally, but I want to see everybody, or I want everybody who's watching to see as well. So 36 milliseconds for just direct into the capture card without using the OSSC or the Dex board at all. And now let's go into the decks, and let me just grab my trusty HD15 to start, and we should see the difference, and that will be whatever lag is added, which should be pretty close to zero if my guesses are all correct here.
Okay, so yeah, I think you are on the line multiplication mode, which is the default right now. So with that, yeah, it's pretty close to zero. There's also the scalar mode, which where the latency depends on a couple of things. So in general, that's more.
Okay, so the time sleuth is set to 240p. Hopefully this is all coming through the stream correctly. Yeah, it looks like it. Okay. Time sleuth is going to 240p, and now we are in. And we'll go over these settings later. I just kind of wanted to skip to it. So
By
we're
the
in.
way, can you show the firmware version by pressing the info button? I think uh, you might want to check that you are on the latest.
Oh,
Oh, actually, May 2.
I could always update it,
Yeah.
but we are in.
Yeah, well, it's probably not that big of a difference, but yeah.
All right, so let's test it in the exact same way in line multiplier mode. I gotta line it up, which is why it's kind of all over the place here. So it looks like variable input latency. Is it buffering a few lines?
Yeah, just a couple lines in the adaptive multiplier mode.
Okay, so this essentially is kind of like how the RetroTink 5X works in that it doesn't buffer a
Yeah,
full
but
frame, it's variable, correct?
yeah, well, I don't think the latency, of course, it depends how this calculates it, but it should be very constant. You can also try setting it onto the pure line multiplier mode where it's basically the same as the original OSSC,
Okay.
because here it captures between, let's say, 2 and
Ah,
40 lines.
Okay, now we're in pure mode.
Yeah, so here it's only basically 2 lines.
Yeah. Okay. So at most it would be a few milliseconds of lag in this mode. I'm trying to hold my hand really still so I won't. So that's pretty cool. I do see it jump up. So I guess this could buffer up to half a frame, you think, or just a few lines?
No, it's on the line multiplier mode, so it doesn't really buffer that much.
Interesting.
So
Okay. And out of curiosity, I wanted to see the full mode as well. So scalar mode.
yeah, that should be around 1 frame.
Scalar output. Okay, 1920 by 1080 and
Yeah, with the new firmware, you are able to press like the enter button on those modes, so it's a bit easier to browse things, but I suppose it takes a bit too much time for you to update it.
okay, so all that makes perfect sense then. It's basically 0 in the pure line multiplication mode, and it is in each of the other modes it buffers a few more lines, adding a tiny bit more latency. So this is still exactly what you would call a incredibly low lag, excellent gaming solution. So I kind of knew what we were going to see here, but I always like showing the results just for people to have their own peace of mind. So I guess I'm
Yeah, I can actually send you link to the latest firmware, so you can just copy it on the SD card the normal way. You don't have to write it as image, so basically
okay.
replace just file on there, so it shouldn't take that long.
Oh, I'm only on the left speaker again, huh? I'm sorry. I do this every time I start a new stream with um, a new setting in OBS. Let me just. All right, I should be on both speakers now. My apologies. I do that every time. Okay, I will. Let me switch over to display capture mode. I just want to download that file here. Marcus, could you just put the link right in the Discord chat if you have a moment?
Yeah, just getting the link.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, so when you insert the SD card to your computer, you should see that the root directory with that file in it, so just replace the existing one.
Okay. As I'm doing this, people were wondering if this will be on sale soon.
Yeah, it's currently onto the testing phase in the factory, so it still probably takes a couple of weeks. So, but most likely you are able to buy it before July,
Before
unless there
July.
are
Wow,
some
that's
post.
pretty awesome.
Well, of course it depends. There might be postage delays, etc. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't promise anything, but if things go right, it shouldn't take too long.
This is pretty cool. I was, with the part shortage happening, it's very sad to see a lot of projects get delayed. But I do think that delaying the OSSC Pro was the right move, so you don't have to scramble to try to get all of that stuff done in such a short period of time. So, because you never know when you're going to be
Yeah,
able to finish them.
well, I partly agree. So of course, more time is better, but on the other hand, it could have been released late last year already. Well, actually, already 1 year before that, if we just wanted to rush everything and get it out as a kind of not fully complete, but of course that's not ideal.
Yeah.
But yeah, the part shortage has been quite bad.
So to flash the new firmware to this is essentially just flashing a micro SD card. It's about as easy as anybody could imagine. That's all. That's the new
Wait a
firmware.
minute, did you just copy the file or just write it as image?
I re-imaged the whole thing.
Oh, okay, then I need to send you, because that file was kind of supposed to be just copied onto the card.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's funny. Okay, time to do that
Okay, well,
again.
let me send you another link, so. Yeah, because initially you have to write the image as image, but after that it's just matter of replacing the one file on the file system.
Okay. As soon as I get that link, I will do it again. Sorry about that, everybody. I kind of like making mistakes like that live, though, because it shows what other people might run into. Okay.
Sorry, that's the same link.
Ha.
So, wait a minute.
Game Rocker wants to know if the final version will have inputs other than SCART, and the OSSC Pro will, but this one, the DeX board at the moment, is SCART only, but you could pass through any signal. So you could use the HD15 to SCART for VGA.
Actually, once you download the image, you can access the input menu, so we can then continue that discussion.
Okay, I shall do this again. Okay, that all looks like it flashed properly. Let me switch that back over to the capture card. I always like it when firmware updates are that easy. Very quick. Okay. It still says version 0.55 though.
For yeah, that's probably fine, but if you press the info, I think it should have now. It still has the update. Can you, if you use the menu, do you see the input menu?
No.
Okay, well.
Should I try a different firmware?
We just have to.
Or maybe I need to replace that file, right?
Yeah, well, you can try that as well, but yeah, I think basically the commit says that it should be 0.56, so I wonder if that's some of my mistake or if there was problem flashing the.
Okay. 513.
It says. Let me check my board over here. Meanwhile. Okay, it's probably my mistake. I haven't. Yeah, forget it. I have to upload the latest version. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, now it says 0.56 from May 12th when I did that, and now there is an input select. Okay, so all I needed to do was add the file. Yeah. Very cool. Well, that perfectly answers that question then. The input select has test pattern, RGBS, RGSB, component video, RGBHV, and RGBCS. What's the CS one?
Yeah, that's basically the TTL level composite sync.
So,
and of course,
is it safe to plug that in even if it's not selected? So if I have just RGBS selected, but I accidentally have TTL sync going through, is that okay?
Well, the idea here is that if you use TTL sync, that would be input to the two normally used, let's say, unused SCART pins. So it's not designed so that you would route the TTL level C-sync to the normal sync pin of SCART.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the RGB horizontal, vertical, and the RGB CS, then you need a special adapter for those. But that's fully passive, it doesn't have any components, so it's just routing the signals to the normally unused SCART pins.
Okay. I'm going to leave Super Mario World running just because that is something that we all know. And it's got all of the colors on the main screen. I just think that'll be just to start while we're going through these options. I think it'd be the perfect background. But of course, I'll show examples of other stuff afterwards if everybody's interested in it. Okay, so input select. That one's pretty obvious for what that does. So video in options. These are the same thing, or very similar to what we had on the original OSSC, correct? With the low pass.
Yeah,
filter.
actually it said AV1 dash AV3, but of course on this board it's only AV1. So you have the low pass filter, color space for the component input, and then the color offsets and gains and such.
Okay.
Basically controlling the analog front end.
For the most part, I
cases,
usually leave the low pass filter on auto because it seems to detect pretty easily, right?
Yeah, I think for most of the time people don't need to worry about this menu at all. So
Yeah, this is definitely more of an expert thing. Classic Gamer wants to know, is the SNES running with an RGB hack or just the standard SCART cable? This particular one is using a Voltar bypass board so that I could get the absolute best quality out of it, but I mean, it's really not a huge difference between just a regular SNES. But yeah, I did want to make sure to show one of the best examples I could just for the heck of it. So moving into the sync options, is this another thing that most people wouldn't really use this menu, right?
yeah, this is also something that for most of the time people shouldn't need to tinker with. There is, of course, the last thing is the PLL loop gain. That's something, well, is this SNES de-jittered, by the way?
Is it what? I'm sorry.
Do you have the de-jitter mod on that?
No.
It removes the sync jitter. Okay. So in that case, you can actually try changing that because it basically controls the bandwidth of the sampling PLL. In some cases, with very bad input, you have to change that value from the default, but I think even with this SNES, I don't see any problems with the defaults.
Yeah, I'm using at the moment an AverMedia Live Gamer 4K, and it seems to handle SNES pretty well. Sometimes there's audio issues, but for the most part, it does the video well. So I wouldn't expect that we would need that. So the only other thing that I think we should skip to is going to output options and selecting how you want the OSSC to work. So the way Marcus had set this firmware up is that you could either use it as a line multiplier or as a scaler, which has different buffering and different options with it. And then each of the individual options have its own settings. So as long as you understand that, it's very easy to use, and that might actually be a better way to handle it. But that's kind of the one big thing that I would want to make sure anybody that has this realizes, because it'll make it easier to start out with. So I'm going to set it to line multiplier mode just to check out those options. And then we, of course, could go back and switch things around. But test pattern, of course, you could select different what mode it outputs the test pattern and whether the HDMI full, limited, which is not going to look right here because that's this capture card. Well, actually, I think this capture card can handle both. But it's awesome that you have different HDMI and even DVI modes for devices that are not compatible. So, line multiplier mode, now these scalar output options won't do anything because we're set to line multiplier mode. So that's the only thing where once you've learned this, it's no longer confusing, but since the output's at line multiplier, we go to line multiplier options.
Yeah, it's also something that I've been thinking whether I should just put the scaler by default or as a default setting. So for many people, that's more intuitive. But then, of course, some people prefer the line multiplication type of operation. So, well, anyway, both are there.
I think it's very smart to use scalar as the default because if somebody's TV isn't compatible with line multiplier mode in 1080p or something like that.
Well, it's more like people, if they have used traditional scalers like FrameMaster, etc., which always for example, scale to the full screen instead of just doing the line multiplication.
Okay. So the first,
That's still something I'm considering.
cool. Either way, I think it's great. I like it. I think as long as that is well shown in the instructions, I think that's an easy one. The only question
Yeah.
though, so to start us out, line multiplier mode, adaptive and pure. So pure
Yeah,
line
so the
multiplier
pure is,
mode is like OSSC, right? The original.
yeah, so it's probably not worth going through that, but it's for there as a kind of, let's say, backwards compatibility, or if somebody really wants to use this as the original OSSC, but for almost everybody else, the adaptive should be the setting here, which is
Okay.
much more flexible in terms of what you can do.
Um, and let's just stick with pure for a second, just to go through these. So deinterlacing mode. What's non-interlace restore?
That's basically if you have four ATI interlaced and you want to turn that into 240p. So that's basically if you have some 240p games, for example, which are originally 240p, but then you have these classic collections where they are shown as 480i. So you can actually restore the 240p.
Awesome. So like the things that you would find on the PlayStation 2 Classics collections.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Of course, some of those use filtering things, and so it doesn't always look correct, but with some of those games, it actually can
Yeah, very
kind of
cool. That's an
restore it.
option. Very cool. Um, so the non-interlaced restore offset that just selects which line it starts to deinterlace
Yeah,
on.
so depending whether it's odd first or even field first, so you may need to change that setting as well.
Cool. No, what about the 256 by 240 aspect ratio?
That's when you use the optimal sampling mode. So if you have this 256 times 240 sampling mode, so you can basically select what's the target aspect ratio for that. So do you want to kind of preserve the 1x1 or then try to multiply it so that it's closer to 4 by 3?
Okay. And for the other options in there, so since we're set to pure line multiplier mode, the options that we're going to want are under here, pure line multiplier options. And I want to set this to 5x, my favorite setting. And each of the input resolutions have their own output resolution selecting right here, which is pretty cool. And
Yeah, that's
then,
pretty similar to the original OSSC.
yep. And then for line 2x mode, we're in generic 4x3 now, but I want to try Super Nintendo mode. So I would go to. Oh, wait, no. I'm at
That's
the
now
wrong
the
setting.
line 2x.
Yeah, here we go. Sorry.
And you can also press enter actually here. Don't press the left or right. So
Oh, good.
if you can
Awesome.
press enter now, yeah, it goes to this kind of menu. So
So actually, I'll show this as an example. I'm gonna select the wrong one, 384, and you could kind of see the jitter around the R. But now we go to the correct one, 256. Now, do we have to still set phase in pure line multiplier mode?
well, at the moment, the automatic phase detection isn't fully operational for these oversampled modes. So in this case, you would need to do that, but that's still work in progress, so that it would be fully automatic. So for now, it's automatic for the kind of normal resolution modes for 80p or higher, basically.
Okay, so if I were to switch this back to, all right, let me just put the settings all back to generic so that way um, it's all there for me waiting. So if I were to set this to line 3x, then the automatic phase detection would work.
Yeah, you can actually. There is the advanced menu where you can change it, but the automatic one basically only works for the modes where the ADC isn't oversampling the signals. So for these modes, it's not like fully operational now. But even with that, the ADC is pretty good. So even though you see now that it's not really optimal, there's almost no jitter.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Um, the automatic phase detection, is that something that's coming relatively soon, or is that, a few months out until other things fall into place?
Well, it's probably a few months, I would say. So that's why I recommended that you probably mostly keep the generic for these lower signals.
Still looks amazing in the generic mode. Okay. So to set phase on this, I just want to show that because that's something that a lot of people like to
Yeah,
do.
you probably want to go into the adaptive because it's slightly different there, and I think most people will be using the adaptive mode, so it's better to just show how the phase control works there.
Sounds good to me. All right, I have just switched to adaptive
Yeah.
mode. Now I'm going into not the pure options, but the adaptive ones. I will set this
Yeah,
to 5x. Uh,
okay. Now it's on interlace, so you can just press enter again. So if you see that kind of bracket, so you can always.
yeah, that is very
So now
handy. I
you
have to
have.
get used to that now.
So now you see the 4x and 5x, so you can do either with the cropping or a kind of underscan. You have the selection there.
Perfect. Okay. So now we'll go to the 240p 288 mode. I will switch from that to SNES
Yeah, you
256.
can again, yeah, it should be there.
Okay. And then that's where in the advanced options, adaptive line multiplier
Yeah,
mode.
actually now you see that jitter, I think, on the top of the picture. If you now go back to the PLL control, I think
Um,
you can actually, because I think that
where
might be
where
related
was
to
that
the
again?
sync jitter. It was on the AV1 to AV3 sync opt.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, wow.
You might,
It stopped the jitter.
might, yeah. But of course that means that if you have very picky TV, this actually might. So the idea here is that now the jitter is onto the HDMI signal. So if you have good capture card like here, no problem. But if you have very picky TV, then it would lose the sync.
Right. But just for anybody who might be joining now, we are in line multiplication mode, not scalar mode. So we'll get back to that later. We're just talking about in line multiplier low lag mode at the moment. There's other options for the other stuff. So okay, so I could go into this adaptive line multiplier advanced timing. So I see size and position, very cool.
Yeah, so there is the clock and phase, then size and position. So if you have this preset mode, you probably won't need to adjust the size, maybe position. But
I personally never touched the size, but the position is awesome. And let me just, let me hit it up 4 times just to show the difference. So I know we're going to drop
we
signal
can
in that.
probably come back to this in the scalar mode because then you can disable the frame lock and then it
Oh,
doesn't break the sync when you set the size
okay, awesome.
or
So,
position.
oh, I think I hit the wrong. So to select phase in this one, once we're in this mode, I basically just hit up or down, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
All
The
right.
thing here is that at the moment it only changes the phase of on the ADC, so it's still like oversampling the signals, and actually you would need to change the sample you process. So that's not yet implemented, so it's still work in progress. Yeah, but as you see, compared to the original OSSC, even if you have non-optimal phase, the jitter is very minimal.
Yeah. So when you originally sent me the OSSC Pro prototype, I was able to use it in pure line multiplication mode in 1080p 5x on my LG OLED that is not compatible with the same thing with with the original OSSC, which I thought was very impressive because you were somehow, even in line multiplication mode, able to increase the compatibility.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much thanks to the new video ADC.
All right, that's pretty cool. Um, so would you like to switch over to the scalar output now so we could show people those features?
Yeah, maybe you just quickly go. Well, did we actually go through all of the line multiplier? I think we went through all of those. Yeah. So yeah, maybe you can switch to scalar.
Yeah, I think we did go through all of those. Yeah, okay. So let me switch over. So now we're in scalar mode. It looks amazing all of a sudden. And I'm sorry, I just have to keep repeating myself. If you've been here since the beginning of the stream, I'm sorry. But each of these modes has its own subset of options and settings. So since we're in scalar mode now, we're going to go to scalar options, not line multiplier options. So output resolution. So I see 50 to 120 hertz here. So that means that
yeah. So basically, that's the range that it supports. So first you select the resolution, and it's just saying that it supports from 50 to 120 hertz output. So actually, what defines the refresh rate is the next option, which is the frame lock.
Okay.
But since we are not on the OSSC Pro, the 120 hertz with this 1080p output, that doesn't work. So
it doesn't work at all?
Yeah, because of the HDMI transmitter on the DE10 Nano isn't powerful enough.
Okay.
So if you want to use 120 Hz, you have to stick to the 720p. output.
Oh, but it would do 720p 120 hertz.
Yeah, you can try that.
That's interesting. I'm gonna try it. I don't know if my capture card will handle it. I don't think so. But I have a projector that probably will, which I don't know how I would show that on stream, so I'd have to do that afterwards. But let me
Okay,
try.
by the way, before you select the option, you don't have the character display on the front, right?
No.
Okay, yeah, okay, it seems to work. Okay, yeah, but you are still in the 60 Hz, so it's just that if you lose the signal, you have to know what to press to get it back. So if you now set it to on, then just press up and enter again if it doesn't sync with your monitor.
So what's the 2x hertz mode that we're in now?
So now I think the output should be 120 Hz. So if you go back to the or exit the menu and press the info button.
Info.
Oh, but wait a minute. Yeah, so now it claims that it should be 120 Hz output. So maybe you can verify that with your capture card, but...
Yeah, capture card says 1280 by 720 at 120p. Interesting.
Yeah, and while we are at the 120 Hz mode, you can also now activate the black frame insertion if you want.
Yeah, now for anybody watching on stream, it's probably not going to show any difference here, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what that's going to look like on 120 hertz TVs. But okay, so to go into that, I would go into scalar options.
Yeah, that's under the post-processing options actually.
Oh, okay, right here. Post-processing. BFI for 2x is on.
Okay, now it seems that there's some problem.
It's definitely the capture card. So I wouldn't, this is not set up
so
for
it actually drops every other frame, so yeah.
Okay, so I will be trying this out on my projector later on. That is pretty cool. That is really cool. So I will go back into the scalar options. So frame lock on. This uh, this allows the buffer so that things like resolution switching will work. Correct?
If you set the frame lock to off, then it's then triple buffering, so it's doesn't desync when you switch the input resolution.
Okay, I will demonstrate that right now. I know a few people in the chat were curious, so perfect time, to look this up then. Alternate 240p, 1080i. So that's it. Every time you see a new marker on the screen, it's switching resolutions. And with frame lock off, it's instant. It's maybe half a second it blinks out a little bit. But if we turn it on, it's the typical dropout, which you would find on most scalers that don't have buffering in it. So this is perfect. That means you have the best of both worlds. You have the ultimate in compatibility with frame lock off, and so all of those games that switch resolution, you're good to go. And you could turn it on if you just have a display that's compatible. You don't need any other resolution switching, and you're good to go. That's very cool. And so 100 hertz and 120 hertz. Are these for? How is that? So this is.
So that's basically the refresh rate. It actually outputs when you disable the frame lock. So you can, for example, to do if you have a really crappy monitor that doesn't support 50 hertz and you have 50 hertz game, then you can set the frame lock off and 60 hertz. So then it would convert 50 to 60 hertz.
And much like we were just discussing, I could take the 120 hertz 720p option, and if I have any issues at all in frame lock 2x mode, I could turn it off and just set it to off 120 hertz, correct?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm just going to leave it here just to make it easier for the other things that we show. And I'm going to bring this back up to, I'm going to bring this back up to 1080p 5x because I like it to fill the screen. All right, I'll put Super Mario World back on. I really love how you could click on some of the options and have it come up like this so that you don't have to cycle through. It brings up a submenu. That is awesome.
Yeah, well, there's still much to do on the usability side, but it's at least much more intuitive than it was, let's say, half a year ago.
All right, 16 by 9. This is actually really great if you have certain displays where you want to use the display to squish the aspect ratio back in, or like the LCD CRT from Greg, or if you're just a crazy person like Ian, the historical nerd, who wants to play their games stretched. And yeah, square pixel mode.
Yeah, I think now you are on the generic mode, so it's actually now showing the resolution which the generic mode uses. So I think for now you should just stick onto the 4:3 and 16:9.
Agreed. Scaling algorithm. So I was messing with this before. I'm going to show the options now on Super Mario World, but for everybody watching in the chat, please keep in mind that these are really going to be something that you would use for 3D graphics games or for higher resolution, not for 2D. But so integer underscan is...
Yeah, so also the integer, you have to remember that now this is on generic mode, so it's not really kind of the optimal for the integer scaling, but you can still try it.
Yep. So what is the difference between nearest and integer then?
Well, the nearest is nearest neighbor, so it always scales to the full screen, even if it's not like integer, but then uses the nearest neighbor algorithm, so it's avoiding the blurriness you might get with bilinear and such.
Okay. Lancos, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, by the way.
No problem. So these are the more traditional ones which are used on the film content and also well some other things. But for 3D games, these are more like appropriate. So the auto mode actually uses the nearest for low-res stuff, and then these Lanzos stuff for the high-res stuff. But actually these, yep.
So for the scan lines, are you going to have different type of scan line filters like the Mr. supports?
Yeah, so that's actually, there's a different kind of difference between doing the scan lines during the scaling and after the scaling. So that's just an example that you can also apply the scan lines during the scaling, but for now I would really recommend to use the post-processing scan lines that are on their dedicated menu.
Okay. What is edge threshold?
So as you saw in the scaling algorithm, there were a couple items which had two different settings, or there was the Lanczos 3 and Lanczos 4. So it's actually such that it can use different algorithm for parts of picture which are kind of decoded as edges.
Interesting.
So basically that sets the threshold for that.
So if I put Lancos...
Yeah, for anybody interested, it's using the Intel Video Image Processing IP right now. So these are pretty much the options provided by that IP. But of course, in long run, the idea is to kind of do all of these like custom.
All right, I'll leave that back to auto. Deinterlace mode, Bob, Weave, and Motion Adaptive. I think everybody in the chat would probably understand what those are at the moment. But in case, I'll just give this super short one. Bob deinterlacing alternates, gives you a little bit of a flicker, but it's very fast deinterlacing, and it's what you had on the original OSSC, the original RetroTink products. The Weave option gives you a lot of those interlacing lines. That kind of drives me crazy, but there's no flicker. So really, depending on your content, I imagine if you were doing like a turn-by-turn role-playing game, Weave would probably be excellent. And then Motion Adaptive is kind of a happy medium between them both and works really well. Where did you write your own Motion Adaptive scaler for this, or was this using...
No, so as I just said, it's using the Intel IP for this one as well.
Cool.
So the frame buffering and deinterlacing is using the Intel IP right now, but in long run, the idea is to make custom implementations.
And because this is running on a DE10, does that mean that Mr. developers will be able to port their scaling algorithms over, or is it just a wildly different architecture?
I think it should be able to port relatively easily.
That would be very cool.
I haven't looked that closely into those, so I may not be the right person to say it, but I don't think it would be a very big task.
And is the software for this project open source, so people are allowed to do that?
Yeah, except for the Intel IP, it's pretty much all open.
That's awesome. That's really cool. All right, Motion Shift. What is this one?
That's related to the motion adaptive deinterlacing, so it's kind of threshold for that. So which part is detected as moving when the Bob is applied, and which part of the picture is detected as static where the Weave algorithm is applied. So it basically controls the threshold.
Cool. And these modes are exactly as we saw before. And I'm going to hit... I'll wait for...
Yeah, but the thing here is that there is a bug in the Intel IP, so not all of these work. I think you can try the next one, the 512 column.
But this would be for the 512 pixel resolution SNES games, not the 256.
Yeah, but this one works pretty well for the normal 256 as well, so...
I mean, generic looks pretty damn good to me. It's it looks, I mean this respectfully, but generic here looks better than generic on the original OSSC.
Yeah, again, the video ADC is so much better that it's quite a big difference.
Yeah, I mean,
Of course, in best case, there is not much difference, but in typically the difference is big enough so that you can notice.
Yeah. And, there's one thing that I always want to make sure to say whenever I'm talking about this. I'm a nerd. I'm always super excited about whatever's new coming out. But just because the Dex board is out doesn't make the original OSSC obsolete. It's still an amazing product that I use all the time. And if people own them, you still have a great experience, especially if your TV is compatible with the modes and the consoles that you want. There's zero wrong with the original OSSC, but I am very impressed with what I see here. All right, so advanced timings, same thing with clock and phase on this one, size and position.
Yeah, but now if you disable the frame lock, so you can easily show how let's say, if you change the position, how it actually works.
So I'm at frame lock.
You have
off
already
60. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so you can now try switching the position, for example. So.
Sorry, I got out of the menu here.
Real time.
Position. Ah, very, very cool.
And if you press enter on the remote, you see that the step size, you can also change that.
So what is this? Oh, so how many?
So if you move, now let's put it to 4 or 10, and if you move somewhere, it's faster then.
I get it now. Okay, whereas before when the step size was at 1, it was really moving it 1 pixel at a time over.
Yeah, and if you press exit, and there you have the reset option if you want to go back to the default.
Actually, let me show that just to make it easy for everybody to see. So if you're like me and you're constantly playing around with stuff and then you realize, uh-oh, I messed it up, all you have to do is hit reset and it sets it right back to the middle like it was before. That is very cool. And this is zooming.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, there's still quite a bit of work to do on this side, so you might hit something that doesn't work correctly, but...
So would you be able to use the zoom setting and the size settings to adjust games like when PAL games don't take up the full screen so you could stretch it? It's the same theory, right?
Yeah, that's perfectly possible.
Okay, I am going to reset this. Okay. So let me just go double check here. So get motion shift, edge 50 to 120. I was just looking for how to essentially make this 5x again. So I would do integer overscan, and that's 1080p 5x, right?
Yeah, in this case, yeah.
I think the only thing I'm not quite understanding, and I apologize, but so integer overscan is just essentially 1080p 5x, integer underscan is 1080p 4x. If I were in 720p mode, it would be 3x, but...
Yeah, both would be 3x, so it's kind of, you do integer scaling, and if it's not perfectly integer, let's say you are converting 240p to 1080p, then you select whether it's underscan or overscan. But for 720p, it's the same result, of course, because
right,
3 times exactly.
I think the only thing I'm not quite clear on is how nearest would differ to that in these settings.
So the nearest, it's not exactly, it's kind of 4.5x.
Okay.
In this case, so it's not integer.
Well, that's a perfect description of it. It's okay. So scaling algorithm, let me go just for the heck of it, position. Now I'm going to, oh yeah, I gotta go the step size back to 1. Now I'm gonna try to get this centered. Perfect. So the audio options, this is the only other issue I had, and let me see if I could turn up the volume on this. So people in the chat should be able to hear this. Please let me know if you can't. But I'm going to to switch it. So when it hits 96K, my capture card didn't understand it. I'm sure people in the chat are hearing this now. It's because it's probably not the correct timings. However, when you switch it to 48, my capture card did like it. So, is there a recommended sampling format that you should suggest we keep this at?
Well, for most people, the 48 kilohertz would be quite good. So I don't think many of us would have any good reason to change it. But it's there anyway. If somebody else wants to actually use a 96, and on OSSC Pro you have also the 192 kilohertz.
Oh wow, that's cool. So
But
if you
it's
have
more like how audiophile you are. It's not really, for most people, it's not going to make any difference.
do you have fancy audio equipment at your house?
Well, relatively okay. I've built two out of my 4 speakers and
Of course you
relatively
did.
new amplifier, so
That's
it's
awesome. What amplifier are you using?
good. It's this Anthem MRX. So I was previously using Denon amp, but switched into the Anthem one quite recently.
That's so funny. I just got a good deal on an Anthem MRX 510. So just last month, I've been using that because it was a very expensive amp that I got for about half price. So
Yeah, the only downside is that it doesn't really support HDMI 2.1, but I don't think if any amplifiers really support it yet, at least the full 50 gigabits per second.
yeah, that's true. And but it does work excellent with ARC, the audio control. So the way I had it hooked up to my TV was I just had the HDMI plugged into the ARC setting so that whenever I turned the amp on, it just pulled whatever the audio signal from my TV was into the amp, and I didn't even have to worry about, higher HDMI. I just ran all my video directly to the TV and then only used the amp for audio, and it did a pretty amazing job.
Yeah, is that the enhanced ARC? Because the original ARC spec was kind of limited, so you couldn't use multi-channel PCM with that, but with the enhanced ARC, that's also possible.
Correct. So quad stereo is the same as you did in your CPS digiboards, where you could send 2.0 audio to all of the speakers if you'd like, correct?
Well, actually only to the rear speakers, so it won't, even though you have the 7.1, it doesn't try to send it to the center speaker. So it's just the kind of moded outputs to the amp, but in any case, it's just copying the front stereo to the rear speakers.
Cool. Yeah, this is I remember messing with this when I was testing the CPS2 Digi, and it was very cool because it gave a real sense of surround when I was playing shoot 'em up games, because I was, every time the bullets were going over my head, I could kind of hear them in the speakers. So this is a pretty neat option that if you're playing in surround sound, I would recommend just messing around with it and pick what sounds better to you.
Yeah, I think the Denon app got this multi-channel stereo, so maybe I should just use that name or something more familiar. It might be a bit confusing name.
Yeah. And the AV1 audio source, so that just selects between the SCART input and the SPDIF input for people that want digital audio through this.
Yeah, unfortunately on the DE10 Nano, the Toslink or the SPDIF input of the HDMI transmitter is not connected by default, so you have to add one wire on the board.
So that wire that's added to this that I showed in the picture, that is both digital and digital and analog audio routing from the DEX board to the DE10.
Yeah, so it's separate from the wire I was just referring. So that's just the audio connection between the board and the DE10 Nano.
Oh, so if I wanted digital, I would have to add another wire to it?
Yeah, just on the DE10 Nano, because the HDMI transmitter on the DE10 Nano, it has the SPDIF input, but it's not connected to anywhere. So you have to actually solder a wire onto that pin and then to the pin header.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I would think that many people with these setups that would want to connect digital output to their receivers would just go directly into their receivers. But I guess I could understand why people might want to go through the trouble. If you have something like we just discussed with an ARC setup, so everything's run through your TV, through the receiver. So very cool that that's an
Yes.
option.
Yeah, so if everything runs through HDMI, so then it's much easier that way.
Cool. Scanline options. I haven't even looked at these yet since I got it. So, uh,
Yeah, this is mostly the same as with the original OSSC,
okay.
but on the custom one, you are now able to fully select the intervals.
So at the moment, it's basically uh, it's similar to the original, but there will be newer options going forward.
Yeah, and you can actually set it to custom just to demonstrate how you can currently customize the scan lines. So if you go back and set it to custom,
Um,
so it's on the scan line type. So the type you have the horizontal now, then there is also the vertical and both, and but then there is the custom. So now if you go to the custom menu, uh, you can set these as you like. But
will this be
just to
something?
demonstrate the yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
So if you want to demonstrate the interval, so you can, let's start with everything 0 except the subline 1 strength.
Okay.
So you can put it to 100.
Okay.
By the way, was this now onto the integer scaling or which?
Yeah, it's integer overscan.
Okay, let's see. So the horizontal interval, now you have not horizontal scan lines, so that doesn't do anything. But if you change the vertical interval, you can see that you can change the interval of the, oh, yeah. So by
Interesting.
default it was on 5, but you can also change the interval here.
Will there be the ability to import and export scanline profiles when people start to mess with them and make their own?
Well, probably at some point that kind of functionality will be added, but at the moment there isn't even the saving and loading of profiles, so that's also a work in progress.
Okay. All right, let me turn scan lines off. Yeah, it would be very cool if the Mr. team could port their scan lines over. That way, everything, especially because it's running on the DE10, so it would be kind of neat for anybody who has all of these. A few people were jumping in the chat late, so the use case for this is if you already have a DE10 Nano or if you have access to one, you can get OSSC Pro. So I guess somebody in the chat said OSSC Pro Lite, which I guess is a pretty good way of saying it, but you could get that kind of functionality through the DE10 using its HDMI output. And somebody who has a DE10 for this is almost surely going to be using it for Mister as well, which is why I think it's pretty cool that it's a possibility at least that you maybe there could be differences with the scaling algorithms and especially the scan lines and stuff like that. Post processing. Oh, that's cool. So you could just select the mask on the outside. I think black is probably best for most people, but this is certainly a help for a bunch of different reasons. I like it. Mask brightness. So in the post-processing, that was where we had to select our BFI settings.
Yeah, so the BFI only works if you have a kind of output refresh rate at least 2 times the input, so
Okay.
that you don't accidentally do anything funny here.
Cool. And then basic settings, initial input, test pattern. I love the test pattern, by the way, because it is so often I'm testing a console, and as soon as the test pattern pops up, that's how I know. Okay, my OSSC, or in this case the DeX, is working. Everything's powered up. So if I turn on the console and nothing happens, then I know where to start troubleshooting. So that's very cool that you
Yeah,
added
it's
the test pattern.
also unlike the original OSSC, you can change the resolution of the test pattern in the opposite output menu. So
Hmm.
you can try immediately if your TV supports certain modes, for example.
Oh, that's very cool. I'm gonna go back to that just to
Yeah, you can press
see.
0 to or from the input select to get to the test pattern.
Okay, so I have it set to 240p. So that means if I just having it set to 240p, I would be able to tell if the output resolution could be detected on that one. That is neat.
Yeah, so now this basically tells that your capture card seems to support 240p.
Yeah,
And if you want to see the actual timings, you can also press the info button on the when you exit the menus.
that's very cool. Where would I set that option again? I totally forgot. Was that in
You
output?
you mean the resolution? It's wasn't it
Yes.
in output options?
That's cool. That is cool. Um, Let me go back into settings. Uh, the full. Yep. So that works great. And then OSD off would only be if
Don't
people
put that.
had the
Yeah,
LCD
because
screen.
yeah. So optionally, you can also put a character display onto the board. So in that case, if you for some reason don't want the OSD, then you can just turn it off.
Okay, that makes sense. Um, I'm gonna leave it on full because, well, you know what? Let me show what simple looks like for people. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's just
basically
the.
reflection of the kind of two-line character display.
Okay. So I wouldn't mess with that. Um, 5 seconds. Well, all right. Okay. Very cool. And the input buttons are just the numbers. Do they match the original OSSCs?
Not exactly. So that's also one of the reasons why I put the separate input menu on the main menu. But for the OSC Pro, there will be, of course, the dedicated remote which has the correct labels.
Okay. Um, so was there anything else that we should demonstrate for 240p signals, or should I go grab like a Dreamcast or a PlayStation 2 to test 480p?
Yeah, go ahead. I think we have seen 240p enough.
Do you have a preference on which of those consoles you'd like me to grab?
Either one is fine.
Okay. It's gonna take a quick moment here. I moved to a house, so I have a lot more space than I had when I was in New York City, but it's still not it's still not a ton of space, so I can't just have all the consoles out at once. Let me I am gonna grab a PlayStation and a PlayStation 2 so that we could also demonstrate Sync on Green.
Yeah, let's hope that works okay because I think I've modded my PS2 for just the RGB plus sync, so I haven't had to use the sync on green for a long time.
I had mine modded for that as well, and then I ended up never using it because I want to be able to test all of these things. So I ended up selling my modded PlayStation 2 because, um, as much as for using it, it was better. I wasn't able to test a lot of these things, so now I just got a basic stock one.
Yeah. Now that you are then going to use the sync on screen, you have to also remember to flick the switch on the board.
Okay. Let me just grab a controller. I wonder what mode my PlayStation 2 is in. I guess this will be pretty interesting to see, because if it was in component video mode, we should just be able to change the input on the DeX board and then switch it there. I guess we'll see in a second. Okay, so it does look like it was in component video mode, so... Alright. So this is kind of neat, so let me... SB... So that's funny. So that looks perfect because it's just reading the RGB lines. So let me switch it to system config. And I can switch RGBS. Here we go. I'll go to OpenPS2 Loader, and hopefully my RetroNAS is all working. I was just doing some updates to that and kind of messing around with it. It'd be embarrassing if it didn't work, because this thing's been working perfect for a while now with RetroNAS and the PlayStation 2 support.
So does it nowadays load fast enough from the Ethernet or SAMPAS error?
Yeah, it does a pretty good job.
Compared to the hard drive, is it okay?
Let me go back. Oh, that's why. SMB server. My controller, I think I need a new controller, because you have to press the start and select buttons hard in order to get any kind of reading on them. So let me, I might just have to reset it then. Yeah, oh, I must not have saved it. It's the one downside of being a beta tester is you're constantly using the newest version, so you never know what's set up to work right or not.
Now everybody knows your password.
Well, it's the global one for it, so all right, reconnect. Hey, there we go. All right. Oh, no. Perfect. Outrun 2006. I love using this as an example, both because I really like the game, but also because right when it boots up, it asks, do you want to switch to 480p? So you don't have to mess with settings or anything like that.
Yeah, that's like very nice for a PS2 game. I think most of those didn't really offer that kind of functionality, or at least didn't ask at the beginning.
Alright, I'm in RGSB mode.
Yeah, I think now the thing is that you also have to flip the switch on the board.
That's that red switch next to the SCART connector, correct? And that's what I did. Beautiful. Is that switch only for sync on green, or is that for other modes as well?
That's also for the component.
Oh, okay. Alright, so now that we're in 480p, we can show some other pretty cool settings on this. Let me just wait for this to load, and I'm going to hit pause so we can check out the different settings. Alright, actually, you know what? Let me just... So we are still in scalar mode. So I can go to scalar options. See what auto does with a 480p signal into 1080p. So auto would stretch it like that?
Yeah, it always kind of stretches to the to fill the screen. Of course, honoring the aspect ratio you set.
Okay. So now pay attention to the car, I guess, and maybe even the tachometer. I'm going to switch to the different scaling algorithms. Or if anybody in the chat sees something different that stands out. I guess this might not be the best example, but I'm definitely seeing a change in different elements on screen with this scaling. Is there one that you suggest for 480p 3D graphics like this?
Well, I would just set it to auto, which is basically as same as this Lanczos 3 Sharp.
Okay. Are there other options that you'd like me to demonstrate in 480p mode?
Well, you can. I think this game supported widescreen, so you can easily switch into that as well if you like.
How did this one support widescreen? Do you know? Was this right in the menu?
I think check the menu. It might be
oh,
here.
Hey, how about that? Widescreen. Okay. All right, so that's great. So as soon as we switched it to widescreen and exited the menu, you could see how the car got squished. So then you would need to set the aspect ratio
right under
16 by 9, and there we go. We have a wide. It's not full widescreen, but it certainly fills a lot more of the screen up.
Yeah, actually, you can now next go to the advanced timings or change the. If you go to the 480p mode and press enter on that, I think there might be a setting for the PS here.
Whoa!
You can try that DC PS2 GC, not this one. This is for the GSM games, but I think for the previous one.
So which this one, the DC PS? Okay. Oh, hey.
Yeah, that one.
That's neat. And I wonder how this capture card's going to react to switching the. Do you think 2560 by 1440 would work with this?
You can try. It's going to kind of exceed the specs of the HDMI transmitter, but Do you know if your capture card supports it?
It should, yes.
Okay, now if you doesn't seem to get
So-
signal, so if you press a couple times up,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, there.
So 1920 by 1440 worked, but 2560 by 1440 did not.
Yeah, I think it usually might be a good idea to go through them on the test pattern mode. Then you already know before you start playing that which ones are supported and which ones are not.
All right, well, I am going to just leave this in 1080p for a moment here. And, wow, this does look great. So this is doubling from 480p to 960 and then stretching to 1080p, correct?
Well, it's directly stretching to 1080p. So from 480p to 1080p.
I mean, it looks
So
great.
that's the polyphase scaling, so it doesn't have to have any kind of middle point.
So it's using polyphase scaling. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this looks excellent. All right, let's pause it. So let me try, just out of curiosity here, we'll put screen back to normal. And we will, oop, wrong button. We'll put that back to 4:3. And now, let's just see what happens with 1920 by 1440. Okay, now it's, for people watching, it's stretching like this because of because it's of my capture card. It's not the OSSC doing this, or the DeX board doing this. And I'm dropping signal now too, so I'm wondering if it's 1440p from the DE10 or if it's the capture card that's giving me trouble. But I was kind of wanted to see the scaling algorithm, because we got integer. So with integer and 480p to 1440p, it's just a 4x, right? Or 3x, sorry.
Okay, so you have underscan 480p, yeah, it's 3x.
And I'm just looking at the details in the car to try to see the difference when I'm selecting the different scaling algorithms. I'll just go back to auto. So this is pretty awesome. Are there any other settings that you wanted me to show? Are there anything else in the menu that we should go through before I kind of show other things?
Well, I think we've gone pretty well through the menus already, so yeah.
All right, let me switch over to me. Okay, so let me unhook all of this. So this is the board that we've been using. Let me see if I could focus a little bit better here. I have my my camera tethered to the PC, so just hold on 1 second and I can get the... Takes a minute to boot. Sorry. I love the Lumix Tether app, but it is not the fastest app out there. Okay, here we go. So this is the board that we've been testing. This is obviously the DE10, the same thing that the Mister has. And if you were just using your DE10 with HDMI out, you didn't have an I/O board or anything on there, the only thing you would really need to do to switch between Mister and DeX, you could swap out your SD card just like a cartridge, just like a video game cartridge. Now we're in DeX mode, put in the other one, and we're in Mister mode. You do not have to change any of these switches that are on the DE10 at all. Those are, I did nothing to the DE10 at all when I switched it from Mr. Mode to DeX, except switch the SD card, nothing else. This SCART port can handle SCART, RGB, component video, RGSB like we just showed, and VGA through a converter. I have, it's right here, I have the HD15 to SCART, so if we wanted to put a VGA source in, you could just use one of those. Marcus, is there any other way to have RGB HV input to this, or you would need a converter like this one?
Yeah, well, basically there is an option to use fully passive converter, which basically just routes the horizontal and vertical sync wires to the specific SCART pins.
So this one combines them using an XNOR sync combiner. So are you saying that people could just run horizontal or vertical sync to a different pin on SCART for this?
Yeah, so actually it wouldn't need a combiner at all.
That's cool, because these XNOR sync combiners mostly work, but sometimes you had a little sync curl in the upper corners. So if that's the case, that means people would be able to have DeX converters, or you could be able to make those to support all of that. This right here was the switch that toggled RGSB. So towards the SCART connector is normal, away from it is sync on green. There is the SPDIF optical audio input, and this was the jumper cable that connects audio from the SCART port to the DE10. On the DE10 itself, you said was where you needed another wire for the SPDIF, correct?
Yeah, so basically next to the HDMI connector there is the HDMI transmitter chip. So
that one.
Yeah, well, let's see. Okay, now it's on focus. So yeah, the closest chip to the HDMI connector. So basically one of those pins is SPDIF, but it's not connected anywhere. So you have to add a wire on that.
Oh, that's a very small pin to solder to.
Well, it's relatively small, yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's still great that the option's there, but like we were talking about before, I really think that if somebody is concerned with getting digital audio through a stereo, they would always have the option to just simply put the digital audio from the PlayStation 2, let's say, right directly into their receiver. Is there anything else about the hardware of this? I'll try to keep this in focus, I'm sorry. Anything else about the hardware of this that we should show people, other than just making a jumper cable and setting it right on? Actually, I could just take it off now just to show people what it looks like.
Yeah, well, the hardware you are showing is the version 1.3, and I've had to modify it a bit, so there is the white Gunnar wire there. So on the production version, of course, that wouldn't be there.
But this is and what's the chip on here? Is that the ADC?
Yeah, that's the video ADC from Intersil, or actually Renesas nowadays, but yeah.
Cool. So that's basically it. You just connect your DE10 to this. Let me try to...
Well, actually, on top of the video chip, there is also the audio ADC on the right, close to the SPDIF connector, and then there is the clock generator close to the...
Let me get this in better focus for everybody. Okay. Okay. And when people purchase it, it'll basically come similar to this with its own cable and the board ready to go so that people could just plug it into their DE10?
Yeah, so the plan is that the production version would include the board and the cable, but the character display, that's fully optional, so that won't be included because it's quite high price nowadays.
Okay. And so it goes on like this. So SCART port is facing the same direction as the HDMI port, right?
Yeah.
And It's basically just an IDE style connector that goes right over the pins, so you don't need to worry about orientation because there's only one way that'll fit on properly, unless you put it on backwards or something. And this thing is count 4 from the top. So basically, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 holes, and then this plugs in. And that's basically it. I mean, this is about as easy as it gets if you want to transform your DE10 to a OSSC Pro Lite. I don't know. That's the wrong words to describe it, but also kind of the perfect words to describe it as well. So, yeah, this is awesome. Do you know about how much this will sell for when they go on sale?
Well, the idea was that, let's say 1 or 2 years ago, that if you were able to make it yourself, it would be less than 50 because there are not that many uh, expensive parts. But of course, things have changed nowadays, and it's impossible to get anything. So uh, the production price won't be as low. So still, I think it should be less than OSSC.
Okay,
But
so
considering the market situation, it's very hard to make anything at a decent price
at the
right now.
moment, in the middle of a part shortage, the first run might be around $100 then.
Well, I'm not promising anything yet, so the final price is probably settled in 1 or 2 weeks, but uh, probably not too far from that.
Okay, and then
Maybe a bit over, but
obviously, when parts come back in stock, that might all change, but that's still a year away, I think, at least. So,
yeah, of course, when we start to make larger batches, of course, that depends how well the first batch is received. Then it's economics of scale, so it's much more cheap to make these. So now the batch size it's just 100, so it's relatively expensive to make such a small batch. So, but yeah, in the long run, that should get cheaper if things go right.
okay. So I guess the only other thing that I forgot to show is just 480i. That's pretty much it. So I'll show that. In fact, I'm gonna show the same game that I just showed, Outrun, but not switch to 480p, which is another reason why I always use this game in my comparisons because it's just really great to be able to have all the options from the same one. Somebody wants to know, is the chip getting hot on the DE10? Um, yeah, but not burn your hand hot. And I don't really know if you would need a fan for the OSS, or I'm sorry, for the DE10 if you don't have a case on it like this one. Maybe, but
Yeah, it also depends on the sampling rate. So if you are inputting 240p, for example, it's not going to sample at high frequency. But if you are inputting, let's say 720p, then the sampling rate is higher and the chip runs hotter. But even with that, I don't think it's that hot that you would need a heatsink or fan.
okay.
Officially, it doesn't support 1080p input. Well, you can do it and it probably works, but then in that case, you might well to put a heatsink on that chip. But if you just use 240p for 80p and such, then I don't think there's any reason to put a heatsink there.
You know what? I'm just gonna grab the disc for this because I'll go through that again.
Okay. Yeah, I think you are now on the live multiplier mode, right? You have the Bob deinterlacing.
I believe so. Let me just
Yeah,
reset this.
actually, yeah. You started from power cycle the board, so it's now on the default settings.
All right. So
Yeah, so you probably want to put it onto scalar mode if you have interlaced content.
scalar mode. Okay, now I'm in frame lock, so I shouldn't get those dropouts. Not in 480p. We're going to stick with that mode, and now we can check out the different deinterlacing. So I'll get us back to the start screen, and we'll go from there. Alright, so now typical Bob deinterlacing, you see a little bit of the shake or flicker or whatever you want to call it. You go into weave mode, that looks really great, but if you watch the number count down, you could see the lines, the artifacts that you get from that. Whereas Bob deinterlacing, there's no lines there, but you get the flicker, and then motion adaptive, you get the best of both worlds. So there's no lines on the numbers, and the car is still nice and sharp with no flicker to it. So that's cool. Motion adaptive is looking good for this. For the Dex board, does it ever save the, or do I have the option to save the settings, or is that coming in the future? And at the moment, every time I power it on,
that's work in progress. So it's not currently implemented. So I could of course throw the same kind of structure as in the original OSSC, but I'm trying to make it so that it's kind of persistent over firmware updates. So when things change, you are not always going to lose the settings every time.
Okay.
But yeah, anyway, I'm planning to add some kind of implementation before the release, so even if it's not just the OSSC one, but let's see.
And that would be the save to the SD card inside the DE10?
I think initially it would use the flash inside the DE10, but at some point the SD card could be also utilized.
And have you tried at all using, like, leaving the Dex plugged in and using the DE10 as a mister?
You mean that leaving the physical board there, but just using it as a mister?
Yeah, so swapping the SD card out.
Well, actually, I haven't tried that. I think for mister, for at least most of the stuff, you need the memory expansion, right? So
yeah, which I think could go on the other side. Let me double check here, because I have...
So in that case, it might actually work.
Let me, I got my mister right here. Let me double check the sides of it. And so HDMI port. No, my RAM module is on the exact same slot as the Dex. So yeah, probably not. You would probably have to swap them back. But you know, I have a spare one here, so why don't we try that? Why don't we let that be the last experiment for this live stream? While I'm doing this, how have you been, Marcus? I haven't talked to you in a while. You've obviously been hard at work on all this different stuff, but how's life been? Everything okay?
Yeah, well, pretty much okay. All things considered, hasn't been that nice 2 years, but I don't think it's that different for anybody.
Yeah.
With this global pandemics and everything.
Yeah, it has been kind of weird, but you know, we do what we can, I guess. Okay, so this is the Mister without a RAM module plugged into it, but the Dex is. One more thing I need is... Sorry, I just needed to grab a controller for the Mister. Trying to find my USB hub. I'm usually a lot more organized than this. I don't know what happened.
So did you just recently move out of New York?
Yeah, I just recently moved back to Connecticut, where I kind of around the area that I grew up, and I miss New York very, very, very much. But at least I have a lot more space to work here.
Yeah, I think housing is much cheaper over there.
Yeah, yes. And right when I was leaving New York, the prices were going down for rentals. And my friend yesterday told me it's the opposite. That prices are now going through the roof again in New York. So I guess I kind of did move at the perfect time. Um, I am so embarrassed to say that I have no idea what happened um, to my USB hub. Give me just one more second so I can find it. But it, I usually keep my Mister stuff right in front of me because I use it almost every day for testing. Oh, found it. It was underneath something else. Here we go. Somebody in the chat had a good question. Does this support downscaling as well?
Yeah, so currently the 480p to 240p downscaling is supported in the line multiplier mode, but I think the scaler also would support that in the long run. So basically downscaling any resolution to any lower resolution as well.
Okay, so then in that use case, people would then just have to do something like use HDMI to component video converter in order to get that output.
Yeah, so yeah, this doesn't have any digital input, so yeah, you have to run everything through the SCART as analog video.
Okay, so this is I'm showing the TurboGrafx core because this does not require any kind of RAM module. I have no idea why here we go. I have no idea why I had scanline saved on there, but so I just wanted to show that as an option to show that this thing does work when the DeX is still connected. You can still use it as a Mister. So the reason I really wanted to test this right now is because, as usual, I have a feeling that as soon as this is released, people are going to come up with very creative and very cool 3D printed cases for all of it. And if that's the case, that would really just allow you to do what I was talking about before and swap the memory cards out and keep a nice case for it. But we're testing the
Yeah,
RAM right now plugged into the other side, and we'll see.
yeah, I think the header blocks are somewhat symmetric, so it's just a matter of setting the firmware so that it does actually use the other slot. So I think it's possible to change either the DeX board or the Mr. RAM module on the other side.
Let's play my
It's just a
favorite
matter
game.
of creating alternative firmware, so of course it's not super convenient, but it's possible.
Okay, so that solves that. This will not run with the RAM on the other side. You're right in that cores might be able to be updated to choose which is which, but at the moment, if you want to switch this, so I'll actually just do it right here. So if this is in, sorry, my PS2 is still working and the fan's kind of loud. All right, so right now I have it in DeX mode with the DeX plugged into the side, working exactly as is. If you want to switch it to Mister mode at the moment, obviously swap out the micro SD to a Mister one. Unplug audio. Unplug this board. And then plug in your RAM where that goes in. And then there you go. Now it's into a Mister. So if you're out there and you're making very awesome 3D printed cases for stuff, keep that in mind for the first run of the DeXs. You're going to want to be able to accommodate so that it's probably going to be a two-piece design, one for this and then one for the DeX, so that people could easily swap these things out. And if you want to be extra special, find a case where this could be, the RAM module could be stored in the case itself so that you don't have to worry about losing it when you unplug it. Maybe even have slots for micro SDs and these, but I think that's absolutely awesome. I think this is going to be a big seller for people on a budget, for people who predominantly use a Mister but still want to scale some of their other consoles. This is awesome. This is a really cool design. So,
Yeah, thanks.
do you think that since the OSSC Pro is on hold because of because of the part shortage. Do you think that it will eventually be released in its current form? Do you think that it will be in maybe you'll wait a little longer and find a 4K chip or something, or it's just too early to tell any of that and you're not sure yet?
Well, it's a bit too early to tell, but I would really want it to get out at its current form. It has been kind of in the stage that it could be released for quite a long time, at least hardware-wise.
Okay. So I think this was the perfect demo because the firmware is not quite in the spot that it needs to be to do things like auto phase detection. So I'll be able to do my usual side by side comparisons of stuff as soon as that version of the firmware is out, and I'll have a written post for that, and I'll link back to this. But this video I think was perfect for people that just want an in-depth view of what to expect from the decks. Quality wise, it's awesome. I'll have the proof for you as whenever the later firmware comes out. So, if you're, in fact, by the time this is ready for sale, I'll make sure to have some very good still shot comparisons just to prove that this is as good as I say it is. But I really enjoyed doing this because I think this is a great hands-on way to show people what to expect when they get it. But this really is super easy to use. It's super easy to assemble, and the only thing people have to think about now is just remember to select the output options for whatever output mode you're in. But I imagine that's actually going to be, in the long run, a very good thing, because if you set it to pure line multiplication for Sega Genesis, because your TV works perfect with that, but then you want to play, like one of the PlayStation 1 games that switches between resolutions, you could have that all set up under regular scalar mode, so you don't have to worry because it buffers enough lines, and you don't have to have framed or full dropouts when you switch resolutions. So I think this really is awesome. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Marcus?
Probably not. I think it was a good session, good introduction to the board.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, both on this stream and all of the time that you put into the OSSC, the Pro, the Dex, the CPS Digi. We really appreciate all of this stuff. We were just talking about you the other day, actually, on a live stream with my friend Arturo. You remember him, I think, and how excited he was to meet you, and how much of a difference the CPS Digi made for live streaming arcade tournaments, as well as just even people who want to practice at home that don't have a monitor, like an RGB monitor. The CPS Digi kits were a huge help. So thank you for all of that.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. That's nice to hear, of course. Now the problem also is that the bot shortage makes it impossible to make those things anymore, at least in a short run. Hopefully things get better soon, but looks like it takes probably half a year to get the FPGAs, for example.
Unfortunately, I think you're right, but well, by that time, I'll follow up with another stream with you, and we'll show everybody what we got for the next time. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Of course, thanks to everybody in the chat for jumping in. I don't think I missed any super chats, but if I did, my apologies. And we'll be following up soon. And Marcus, just hang on 1 second after I close the stream, just to double check a few things.
Just before you close, just a note that any questions you can send onto the Smoops thread, or there's also nowadays a Discord channel on the Classic Gaming for OSSC Pro and OSSC, so you can also write there if you have any questions.
I'll make sure to leave links to all of that. I'll update this description in a couple of moments too. So thank you again, and thanks to everybody in the chat.
Okay, thanks.